Hello everybody, and welcome to the hearing safety brief for the new employees of Villis Manufacturing Incorporated. My name is Taylor Wynn. I have a master's in public health, and I am an occupational health specialist who works with hearing and hearing protection. So welcome. Your other employees are so glad that you are here, and we are so glad that you're here, and we're excited to teach you about hearing. Today's topics will include how hearing and sound work, rules and regulations, what your employer, Villis Manufacturing, does to protect you, how to protect yourself when on and off the job, and some resources that you can use to learn more should you desire. So what do you need to know about hearing? Well, it's complex. You need it. You need it to communicate. And it can be damaged. So if nobody has told you your hearing is delicate, it needs to be protected so that you don't lose it. Let's talk about how hearing works. There's some source that produces sound, and it gets to your brain through the ear. And I know you know this, you know that ears are how sound travel, but I want to show you the inside of an ear so that you can understand the structures and what might get damaged by sound on the job. Sound travels through the ear canal. It hits the eardrum, which is right where that arrow is pointing. Then it travels through the bones in your ear and gets to what is called the cochlea. The cochlea is a very special organ that turns vibration into neurotransmissions so that it can go to your brain and be interpreted as sound. If you want to learn more, I put a link in the description, but I think that's all that you'll need to get through this presentation. So now you understand a little bit about how the ear works. Let's talk about how sound works. Sound is generated from some source, whether it be a machine or an instrument or something. It travels through the air as waves, and those waves hit your ear, and that's how you hear sound. So here's, you don't need to know all of these details, but a source and then a sound wave. This is what people like me or other scientists picture when they're measuring and interpreting sound. So how do we measure it? Well, it involves many different complex things. These here that I've listed, you don't need to know all of them. I'll just boil it down kind of to the main points. While I do that, I'll also show you, these are some of the tools that I use. So you may see me walking around the plant, working with these. This is a sound level meter and a dosimeter. There's some other tools I use as well, and they help me to characterize the sound so that we can implement appropriate measures if they're needed in order to protect you from the sound. So let's boil it down to specifically what you need. Frequency and decibels. These are probably the most important factors related to sound, the most common understood. So frequency. People hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. And generally, a conversation between two people happens at frequencies between 500 and 4,000 hertz. Now, I don't need you to know the details of this, but I just want you to know that when you have hearing loss, noise-induced hearing loss, you can lose the ability to hear certain frequencies. And I know you've probably heard that as you age, sometimes you lose the ability to hear high pitches. Well, on top of that, noise-induced hearing loss can help cause you to lose your ability to hear at these lower pitches and these areas that you normally have conversation in. The other measurement that we use is called decibels. And I won't go into the details of this, but I will show you a scale of how it's used, because this is generally what you will see in the workplace. Different things are measured in decibels. It's kind of like their volume. A conversation you'll see in the green happens at 60 decibels, generally. And the higher the number of decibels, the louder it is. So when you see a decibel rating, this is what they're talking about. There will be a little bit more detail on this in the regulations portion of this lecture. So let's talk about some of the properties of sound. How does it move? Well, you know that sound propagates from a source. And the further away you are from that source, the quieter it is, or the lower the number of decibels. Also, sound bounces off of walls. So you'll see here in this image that from the sound source, depending on where you're standing, you may get more sound waves or less. Standing towards the open end on the right, you're only hit by a small number of the sound waves, and therefore the sound is less intense. When you're standing on the left side by the walls that the sound bounces off of, the sound is more intense. So think about that as you walk through your plant. It will be better to walk in open areas than it is to walk in closed areas. And according to the top diagram, it will be better to walk further away from machinery than it is to walk closer to the machinery. So, taking it back to the ear, what can be damaged? Well, your eardrum, the hearing bones, and the cochlea. The eardrum can be damaged by kind of shock waves of sound or explosions. And if it's damaged, you typically experience a quick decrease in the ability to hear. I don't expect that this will happen to you at this job, but should it happen, do not hesitate to reach out to your supervisor or your doctor. They can track these to make sure that they heal correctly, which they should. Hearing bones, you're at low risk for damaging in the workplace. They're typically hurt by different diseases and genetic disorders. If you have any issue or concern about this, please reach out to your doctor. The cochlea is what I am most concerned with protecting. It can be damaged by chronic noise exposure. Loud noise over time can cause it to not function very well. Interestingly, there are also chemicals that can cause it to not function very well. I have worked with your employer to make sure that none of those dangerous chemicals are used in any of your manufacturing processes. Cochlear injury can lead to decreased ability to hear. It can lead to a ringing in your ears that's really annoying, and it can also cause dizziness. So if you experience any of these things, don't hesitate to reach out because you may be experiencing a cochlear injury. Let's talk about the rules and regulations. Who makes the rules? Well, there's an organization called the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, abbreviated OSHA. They make guidelines and rules and implement them across the nation in places like your employer, Villis Manufacturing. There's another group called NIOSH, or the National Institute on Occupational Safety and Health, another government organization that does research and helps to inform OSHA about what kind of regulations they should make. Together, these implement specific regulations for us, which I will show you. There are many, but what you should know is that your company has to protect you from certain things. One is the permissible exposure limit, an 8-hour time-weighted average of 90 decibels. This is a fancy way of saying that you can only be exposed to sound at 90 decibels for 8 hours constantly. Anything above this puts you at risk for hearing loss. They also describe that increasing the sound by 5 decibels will have the amount of time that you're allowed to be exposed to it. So 95 decibels, you can only stand that for 4 hours. Or let's say it got all the way up to 115 decibels. You can only be around that for 15 minutes without risking damage to your cochlea. Therefore, to keep you from getting even to these points, OSHA implements an action level for a hearing conservation program. At a time-weighted average of 85 decibels, you must, or your employer must start a hearing conservation program in order to protect you. This can include a number of things which I will begin to describe. At that action level of 85 decibels, they must begin to monitor the environment, provide audiometric testing to your employees, enact noise reduction measures, which I will talk about, and train you, the employees, on how to use those noise reduction measures. And finally, they must follow up with workers who have been exposed to noise. Now, there's a lot there, and I want to boil it down to the responsibilities. What does your company do, and what do you have to do? Your company is responsible for providing you with an audiogram if you were exposed to a dangerous level of noise. They then must provide annual audiograms thereafter to track whether your hearing is staying the same or getting worse. You must get those results within 21 days. They also must provide you hearing protection devices if you are exposed to noise over 85 decibels for 8 hours. You do not necessarily have to wear them at that point, but they do have to provide them. They must also provide training about how to protect yourself and keep those records so that doctors can use them to determine how your hearing is. You, on the other hand, are responsible for following your employer's rules, but specifically wearing hearing protection if you are exposed to noise greater than 90 decibels time-weighted average, so that 90 decibels for 8 hours. At that point, you must begin to wear the hearing protection that's been provided. Also, if your doctor sees a standard threshold shift on your audiogram, you must wear hearing protection. I won't talk about the details of a standard threshold shift, but basically it's a sign you can see on that test that shows you've had an injury to your hearing. So, with this in mind, know that this should happen if you get stuck in a bad place or you're exposed to sound. This is what your company should do to help you. But now let's talk about what they have done to protect you. Previous hearing conservation programs have led Villis Manufacturing Incorporated to engineer new controls and do new administrative controls and implement personal protection controls. Their engineering controls consist mainly of modifying sources, environments, and the receiver so that you are protected from excessive noise above that 85 decibel limit. One such project was to fix up this air compressor with new parts so that it was quieter. Another was this metal cutter. They had to not only fix parts, but also surround the area that this is in with carpet so that sound is absorbed better and doesn't propagate out as far. Now, people directly around this still have to wear hearing protection, but overall, it's made it safer for employees around it. And lastly is a big enclosure that they put around a CNC machine. Now, as you probably know, your company handles lots of different types of metal and cuts them and shapes them. This happens inside this large room because it's very loud. And it allows the rest of the warehouse to be at a safer noise level during the day. Some administrative controls they've put in affect both organization and the rules surrounding how you as employees should work. So the big one is work hour regulations. Now, they do this for a number of reasons, but one reason they have work hour regulations is so that you don't work overtime and expose yourselves to varying amounts of noise. If you work overtime, it becomes difficult to track how much noise you're exposed to. So they have requested that you work within your expected hours. Another thing they have done administratively is to design these contour maps and post them in every room so that you know where is safe. You can see here that near the machines, the decibel level is louder, and near the middle, they are not as loud. So following the quieter areas will protect you. The last thing that they have done is hearing protective devices. And this is used in areas that they have not been able to get those sound levels down to safe levels. So there's two main types. This is in-ear hearing protection and over-ear hearing protection. And you are entitled to use whichever you'd prefer. OSHA regulates or mandates that they must provide both adequate hearing protection types to you and train you on how to use them. You can choose whichever is more comfortable to you. Now, let's talk about how you can help to protect yourself on the job. We've talked about what your employer has done, and now what do you do? Well, we ask that you wear your protection correctly. Do what you've been trained to do, because if you don't wear it correctly, it may lead to an injury when you're not expecting it. Also, please follow the posted rules in each warehouse or each room. And then here's a helpful hint you can use if you are in an area that you're not wearing hearing protection. If you find that you are required to raise your voice in order to be heard by a person who's about 3 feet away, then the sound may be too loud. Please reach out to your supervisor so that they can test or contact me to come and test. Reach out if you notice any changes. If you have any hearing problems or you're experiencing any of the symptoms that we described earlier, don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, be aware of your surroundings. We don't want you to end up getting into a dangerous spot because you weren't able to hear. We know it's difficult with hearing protection, so be aware of your surroundings. And how to protect yourself when off the job? Well, keep your music volume as low as possible. Also, ask your doctor about any medications because sometimes those can affect your hearing. Finally, wear hearing protection when necessary. I know many of us like to hunt, and a good way to hurt your ears is by firing a firearm without hearing protection. So please just put earplugs in. If you have any concerns here, then don't hesitate to reach out to your supervisor. You can even use apps like these from NIOSH to test the sound. If you see anything concerning, reach out to us. And lastly, ask your doctor. They can be a good resource to help you test your hearing if we're not doing enough for you. So protect your hearing. Here's some helpful links if you want to learn more. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Here are other resources that I used to help develop it. And if you have any questions, please ask them at this time. I hope you have a wonderful day and you enjoy your new job here at Villas Manufacturing.